What up, y'all? We back. It is after midnight. We're here for our secret sermons. We on Saturday nights do a segment called Secret Teachings of Jesus, where I delve into the Gnostic Gospels. I'm not a theologian. I just like to study these things and read about them. And I was curious and wanted to read the Gnostic Gospels, and I didn't know when I'd get a chance. So I decided to make it a weekly segment for us late Saturday night. And yeah, so one of the things that I like to mention, in case you haven't seen one of these before, is that it is beneficial to study scriptures late at night in the midnight hour. The midnight hour is a very powerful time of day in many spiritual, mystical, and magical traditions, because it's the end of one day and the beginning of the next. And so it's in a liminal space where the veil is very thin. And so when the veil is thin, we can connect more directly to Source, to Holy Spirit. There's also like an energetic quality to packets of time in Kabbalah. So that applies to like days of the year, days of the week, months, even hours of the day, and probably minutes within the hour, although I don't know about that in detail. I do know, however, that between midnight and dawn, those are the most positive times of day. And you know, when you get up in the morning, like, you should do the important things first. Like, set your mindset and get your energy and your spiritual stuff done early and prime yourself. And then the things that are the most important, it's like it's better to do those early in the morning because there's a lot of positive and supportive energy earlier in the day. And as the light is lost, like afternoon, like the day starts getting, like the energy starts getting more negative. And so then there's more possibility for chaos. So that is a positive, that this is a positive time. And so when we connect with scriptures and things at this time of night, it makes it possible for us to have even more revelation or insight or wisdom revealed. And there's also this quality of protection called surrounding light that is sort of available to draw from during this time. And it adds to the surrounding light of our soul, which is like the higher level of our soul that sort of surrounds us and protects us and gives us like covering. And so this time of night has that surrounding light around us. So when we do read scripture and we say put ourselves outside of our comfort zone or do acts of sharing, and we are covered in that surrounding light, you may have noticed that if you ever set out in the intention to do any self-improvement, healing, self-help, if you read a self-help book or a spirituality book, it's like the moment you crack that thing open, you could be looking at the table of contents and immediately, out of the blue, something will show up at your door or come through your phone or what have you. And it's like, all right, thank you for beginning the simulation. Now your testing will begin. And so it's like you have to go through these lessons. And there's always like these challenges or triggers that show up like immediately and that cause you to have to face something and apply what you're learning, the embodiment. And so when we have all this light that is revealed to us, like for instance, during Passover, that was a portal of time and space that was open for us to connect to this particularly heightened quality of the light of divine. And so during the high holidays, these aren't just traditions where we remember like historical things. It's actually like windows of time and space that are open where like the light of source and particular types of energy are available to us to draw in and receive. But we have to do something called building the vessel. That means that we have to earn the light through a process, which is learning lessons, embodying, living out what you are taking in, and, you know, making it real for you, living that truth. Yeah, and so if we don't build the vessel, then it's like we have too much electricity going through a circuit and we trip the breaker. And so when that happens, when we've revealed a bunch of light that we haven't earned, sometimes chaos can sort of get stirred up, because it's like all this raw energy that hasn't been contained in an embodiment yet. And so we have to direct that into something, and that's why we go through a little bit of chaos and we have to embody the lesson. And if we're proactive and we pause and we say, oh my gosh, what a pleasure that this is all happening. I see what's happening now. I can take my time, pause, and choose with my free will proactively, and tune into Source and tune into Holy Spirit. How am I being guided in this moment? You know, then that's when we can up level, right? But the point that I'm making is that when we study this at this time of night, at the midnight hour, a lot of times the light is able to ground into us without that extra chaos that will have to cause like some kind of lesson that we have to live through. Hope that makes sense. All right, so I will say that this is Easter weekend. Last night was Good Friday. I've been doing the Lenten fast, and I just finished 2 days of ritualing for Passover. And if you're just getting here, you're confused. I am both, I'm a Jewish Christian, if that makes sense to you. Meaning I have Jewish heritage on my mother's side. I wasn't raised Jewish, but I've always identified with like the Hebrew traditions and beliefs, and I'm like a very avid student of Hebrew Kabbalah and just naturally a mystic. And I am a Christian, so I kind of consider myself a disciple of the Christ. I like to understand who Jesus was because he was a Jewish rabbi. And so in order to really understand his teachings, I think it really helps to know about the Jewish beliefs and the Hebrew traditions and all of that as well. And also it's an amazing religion where you're really like taking responsibility for yourself and your mindset and your actions and your heart and how you show up. You know, when I think of the Jewish religion, I think of like you take an active participatory role in your like soul correction. And so I think that it is an amazing, like, I think that they're an amazing pairing. I think that they go hand in hand together. And I think that that's what Jesus was getting at, you know, all along. He was trying to just include everybody in the whole thing. And so I'm like, yeah, totally. I'm down with that. Package deal. All right. So, in that vein, I have been doing both sets of holidays. And I get really into a fast or a feast. And so during the Lent holiday or the Lent feast, I actually did give up sugar, candy, desserts, sweets. I love them. And I didn't like do the whole break fast on Friday thing. Like I didn't have anything the whole time. And it's not that you just crave what you gave up so bad and that's like what's supposed to like do it for you. I think what it is that when you give up the food or whatever it is that you give up, as long as you're abstaining from that thing, it's like a spiritual demonstration to Holy Spirit, Source, your spirit team, whoever's on the other side orchestrating all of these things. You're demonstrating to them that you are participating in this and that you want to be alongside the Christ in solidarity in the wilderness so you can find your negativity, so that you can see where you're weak, where you're tempted, or where, you know, you are hopeless or lazy, right? So in order to do that, it's like the volume's got to get turned up in the chaos and in the heat. And it's so funny because the last few weeks at work have just been so draining to everyone, and we've all been so triggered, and we've all had like stuff going on in like our outer lives, like our outside of work lives too. And we've just been so busy. Like there's been so much business at work, and then like so many people left suddenly for like positive reasons. But so I think it's so funny. And so I went in tonight at work, and I was like, I kind of expected, because so yesterday was Good Friday, and that was the day of the Crucifixion. And we had a pretty like busy night last night, and I ended up like by the end of the night, I had like cut my arm, and I didn't even know that. I was like walking around just like bleeding. Oh my God. So yeah, so again, just, in solidarity with the Christ. So I was like, wow, so last night was the crucifixion. That would have been Good Friday. And today would have been that void space where Jesus was in the underworld, like fighting and defeating death and overcoming death and coming face to face with the opponent or whatever. So in the morning will be an Easter, and that will be the resurrection time. But right now we're still in that void. We're still in that like liminal space of, the body dying and the consciousness going fisticuffs with the opponent, and the complete ego death, where we die completely to the self and let that self sit dead for a minute, like a full day. Give it a whole day for that self to be dead, so that you're good and dead, so that when you rise up, resurrected, you are a new person. You are transcendent of who you once were, and you have beat the death, right? You have beat death in your life, meaning the ego's games and plans and plots to keep you small, to keep you in fear and enslaved to the suffering of the mind. And it's helping you die to all those patterns that keep you stuck, that keep you from living and expanding your potential and into your full awakening and into your full self-realization. If we were fully self-realized, we would be able to ascend. We wouldn't need death either. It's like a lot of places in the Gospel of Philip, and this is something that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, is that the secret of the resurrection is that Christ arose before he died, and then he was crucified and resurrected. But it was like he already arose before he died, meaning he ascended and transcended all of his darkness, all of his the human side that keeps us bound to the ego. All of those parts were transcended, and the soul was elevated to the point of that consciousness where it had completely risen out of the body consciousness at that point. So we're always kind of fighting that body consciousness. And so during the crucifixion, during the Lenten fast, we sacrifice the body consciousness, the desire to be in comfort and to, receive for the self alone. The desire to just remain in comfort is kind of what we're going to get into our portion today, because we have to choose to go against our body consciousness. We have to choose to go against our desire for comfort in order for that ego death to happen, and in order for that transcendence to occur. It doesn't happen by accident. It has to happen by our own choice. It's a discipline and a devotion that we give ourselves to. And it has to be a choice, and it's a constant choice, and it's a practice. It's a constant practicing of being aware and choosing and proactively choosing to pause and use that free will in order to transcend our animal nature and rise above our humanity and ascend into our divinity. If I remember when I'm making the video description, I'll try to remember to go back and copy and paste a link to this. I think his name is Rabbi Joseph Friedman, but he had a video that was so good the other day that was like, he was just basically explaining like what's the deal with animal sacrifice. And so he was just talking about how, and like, is it okay to even eat animals, right? And so he was just talking about how kind of like the mineral kingdom is absorbed by the vegetable kingdom in order for the vegetable kingdom to be elevated. And the vegetable kingdom is more alive and has more life force, has more source light than, say, rocks and minerals. So rocks and minerals become a servant to be sacrificed for the sake of the elevation of the higher being of the plant. The plant then is less alive than, say, an animal who has more sophisticated consciousness. And I don't know if animals have souls, but they definitely have a personality. I mean, we can see that, especially with these modern animals, my God. So it's like the animal is more alive and has more of the life force of the creator than the plant. So the plant then elevates itself by self-sacrificing in service of elevating the animal, which is then in service and less alive than the human. The human has a higher consciousness and more of the creator's life force than the animal. We have a higher consciousness and being even than the angels. It's just that we haven't awakened to our divinity within us. That's part of our inheritance. And so the animal is elevated by sacrificing itself for the sake of the elevation of the higher being, which is human. And so the animal is absorbed into the human. So it's like the mineral is absorbed into the plant, and it becomes part of the plant, and it becomes one and unified with that consciousness. Then the plant is becoming one and unified and absorbed and becomes part of the higher consciousness of the animal. The animal is then absorbed by the human being and becomes part of the higher consciousness of the human being. And so eventually, and this is what Jesus did, so the animals sacrificed themselves to elevate human beings or to maintain them. And so the humans are still at sort of an animalistic level at this point until they take it upon themselves to self-sacrifice their ego, their consciousness, their will, their small self, for the sake of the elevation of the divine being within. And so then eventually, when it's all said and done, when we've gone through layers and layers and layers of this like conscious elevation, we're eventually just absorbed back into divine. And we become part of the consciousness of divine once more, in sacrifice and in service of the glorification of divine. So as we self-sacrifice that ego, as we lay it on the cross, as we put aside who we are so sure that we are. Oh, I'm so right. Oh, this is who I am, and this is how I've always been, and this is what I do. Or, this is what I deserve. Or, that's not fair. Or, I'm so angry. I'm justified. Or just, I could never do that. Like, I've never been able to do that. Like, all of these ideas that we have about who we are, who we have to be, who everybody else has to be in order for us to be comfortable, what we can deal with, what we can't, like all of these little small ideas in our head, any real identification as this identity of self is limited. We're so much more. We've lived so many more lifetimes. This is just a role we're playing in the theater of life this time around. And I love this role. I do. I love it so much. But at the same time, I know I'm more than this, than Liz Taylor. You know, there's a whole soul and spirit and an eternal being within me that is part of the Creator. And so the more that I can break the shells of my own negativity, of my own fears, of my own lack and doubt and scarcity mindedness, every time I break those ego shells, that's me laying that ego on the cross. That's me breaking that matzah, breaking the self, breaking the flesh. We're perfecting the vessel as we break the flesh, because we want to rise above the desire to receive for the self alone, the desire to have instant gratification or just stay in comfortable passivity. We're rising above that because we're here to be a channel of the light, and we're here to glorify the divine. And so part of that is that we have to sacrifice our small idea of our life in service of becoming and unfolding into that greater potential that is our divine inheritance within us, right? To express that divine in the world, for divine to have an experience of the world through. So we sacrifice the small self for the sake of becoming a vessel that can receive for the sake of sharing. A vessel that can learn wisdom and share it with others, or apply it to how they treat other people. A being and a person that can, go out of their way to do an act of kindness, or to just be patient, or even to be strong and have strong boundaries and stand up for, a person or yourself or whatever, what have you. But it's all about usually going against the nature of the flesh that wants comfort, that wants it easy. Because we're here to transcend those weaknesses. We're here to do the soul correction. And so whatever is the easier thing that seems like the easier thing to do, or the more comfortable thing to do, whatever is our default thing that we fall back on, that's usually what we're being asked, is usually what's the opposite of that. So, we are self-sacrificing in order to transcend and to be, to kind of gain that divine inheritance, to, evolve and ascend past just a human, or even an animal human. But we want to be divinely human. And so the portion I wanted to read tonight is called Inheriting the Living and the Dead. And I think we've already done most of the heavy lifting to explain or set this up for you to be like, oh yeah, I'm getting this. So I don't think it's gonna be that difficult to unpack. Okay, we're in the Gospel of Philip. Oh, my little bookmark. We're in the Gospel of Philip, and we are covering the portion Inheriting the Living and the Dead. And so the Gospel of Philip so far, if you haven't been watching these, is like these kind of cryptic small portions that you sort of like ruminate on and meditate on. And they're kind of like abstract a little bit. They're also very like, they have a lot of Kabbalistic reference, and there's a lot of layers in the Gnostic Gospels going on about like all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes that we can't see, that really doesn't get talked about in the regular scripture. So I don't know. It's different from some of the others, so it can get kind of far out there. Okay. Focusing. Inheriting the living and the dead. A slave seeks only to be free and does not seek the master's estate. For a child, it is not enough to be a child, but a child claims the father's inheritance. Heirs to the dead are dead, and what they inherit is dead. Heirs to the living are alive, and they inherit both the living and the dead. The dead inherit nothing. For how could a dead person inherit? If a dead person inherits the living will not die, and the dead will come to life. Okay. So a slave seeks only to be free and does not seek the master's estate. This is talking about the person who wants to receive for the self alone, who wants to stay in the comfort zone, who wants to live in the body consciousness, in the consciousness of the flesh, and just do what's easy, not put the effort in, not stretch the self for the sake of something greater, or, to really live into the potential. A slave that seeks only to be free and not seek the master's estate is like, say, a person who's religious and goes to church or temple or whatever, what have you, for the sake of having peace of mind that when they die, they get to go to heaven. And in their life, they're not they don't seriously try to transform themselves. They're probably that person that says well, you just have to accept everybody the way they are and accept me the way I am. And this person does not do the work of the soul correction. They're not trying to break the ego. They're just showing up, and they want a comfortable life, and they just are happy to just be left in their peace and live in the mundane, and basically feel kind of a warm fuzzy feeling that angels, those porcelain plate angels, that are sentimental angels, they're kind of taking care of them, and somebody will be there at the pearly gates for them one day, and they kind of think of it as that kind of fairy tale cartoon. That is a slave that seeks only to be free and does not seek the master's estate. This is someone that just doesn't want to have to worry about it, wants just kind of the peace of mind, not peace of soul. There's a difference. Someone who just doesn't want to be bothered and just wants to convalesce alone, in ease, is different than someone who wants a deep, resounding peace on a core level. It takes different things. The person who has deep inner peace does not get to just phone it in as the slave who seeks to be free. So, a slave seeks only to be free and does not seek the master's estate. Seeking the master's estate means actually seeking wisdom, devoting the self to learning the mastery of mind, heart, body, soul, and spirit, learning that spiritual alignment, learning those disciplines, and keeping them and practicing them. Someone who seeks the master's estate, that is someone who is actually actively working to transcend their own darkness, their own demons, their own pain, because they want to open their heart. They want to heal their heart. They want to feel more love and fulfillment in the world and in life. And they want to be able to give more. And they want to make the world a better place instead of adding more darkness to it. Right? So this is a person who's going to put the effort in to seek the master's estate. I want it all. I don't want to just float through life and phone it in. I want to suck the core out of the marrow. What is going on in the cosmos? What is beyond the edge of the universe that we live in, beyond the multiverse, beyond this reality? What is lurking in the depths of my subconscious? What is the furthest reaches of my soul and spirit? All of those things. Yeah, let's get out of our comfort zone. Let's break a sweat here. Let's do something, people. So for a child, it is not enough to be a child, but a child claims the father's inheritance. So a slave has been taken against their will, and they are not interested. They just want to be left alone. And so maybe they even want to get free from the whole thing. It's like a slave taken against their will is like a person who is like, oh, well, I'm abiding by what my family taught me to believe. And I go to church and I do the right thing, or I go to temple and I'm following along and, you know, I'm following the rules, but like, I really don't, like, my heart's not in it. I'm just like, I'm showing up, but like, I'm not really connecting with it, and I don't feel it paying off, but there's just no real connection. It's just like, I'm just doing this because I have to, because I was taken against my will, and this is the life I was put into, and now I feel that like I'm betraying my family and my beliefs and my roots and everything I came from, you know, if I, you know, think independently, or if I rediscover this on my own, you know. A slave seeks only to be freed and not seek the master's estate. For a child, it's not enough to be a child. I was going to say one more thing about being like someone against their will. Oh, and then too, like a slave that seeks to be free and does not seek the master's estate. This can also be a person who was traumatized by religion and wasn't able to have their own like experience and like a supernatural level for it to be real for them. So it was just heavy-handed and projected, and they were forced into it outside of their will. Maybe even at the level of like cultiness or literal cults. And so a lot of these people, and some people were just like forced to go to these churches where they were like they were taught by these pastors that went to these like Bible colleges, who were basically just like, it was like basically like the McDonald's of pastors. And it's not that they have this like deep, like complex understanding of scripture. It's just that they wanted to have that as their trade. And they went to this like school that's like pumping out like McDonald's pastors who basically buy their sermons from copywriters. I found out that this was a thing in recent years. I didn't even know that like half the pastors out there aren't even writing their own content. What is the point? Who are these people writing your pastors? Like what are you, like, who are you following at your church? Like, this is your shepherd? You're trusting this person. They're buying their sermons. They have no understanding of it. And so there are entire generations of people who are like, this is fucking bullshit. And they've been wounded and scarred and traumatized, and either have been forced into very strict and stern environments where they've been practically abused because of someone's like tight grip on their truth and their beliefs at the cost of all of their family's emotional needs. So yeah, people are like escaping. They're trying to like run for their lives. Those are usually the people that find me, right? All the saved Christians out there, they like to throw judgment on me for being a tarot reader and all that stuff, and they don't agree with me. And they don't get it. And I'm like, okay, well, fine. Go fuck off then. You're saved. Like, have fun at church. You and all your friends are good. But all of the people who were ostracized and alienated and left for dead, like, we're all together and we can come over here and, like, have our thing the way that we can do it. And you guys are fine to do your thing the way you want to do it. So I cuss. It happens. I don't think YouTube likes it. That might be one of the many reasons why I'm buried in obscurity. Like this channel! Subscribe to my channel. Like this video. Okay, so some people are just escaping. Escape from LA. Escape from New York. This was an action movie from the 80s. Franchise. So yeah, so for a child, it's not enough to be a child, but a child claims the father's inheritance. So when you feel like you are part of this, that you belong, and that you are like a piece of your father, of your parent, you're like, no, what's yours is mine. Like, what you have left over and what you have created and grown, when you pass on, it will be mine. It's like, who else would it be for, you know? I am like your DNA. So like, you know, it's only natural. Same with a person who understands and feels that they are a child of source. When they understand like, oh my God, I'm a child of this universe. I'm a child of the cosmos. I'm a child of source. There's a consciousness running through me and through all things that I am made of and a part of and that I live in. And that, for that person, realizing that, oh my gosh, my creator is out there and I have the ability to connect with this creator. And oh my God, like the implications of the miracles and wonders and like awe-inspiring vast like expanses of this reality. Oh my God, that's the kind of person that's like, yeah, I want to inherit the master's, you know, estate. I want to learn. I want to delve into the wisdom. I want to transform. I'm hungry. I have an active desire to pursue and to build a vessel as a student, and then to share that out with the world, because I want the world to I want the suffering in the world to end, and I want peace and I want unity. That is what that child expects. And because that's their claim and that's their legacy to continue and to take care of. It's their inheritance. Heirs to the dead are dead, and what they inherit is dead. Those first people, the slaves that we're talking about, those are the heirs to the dead who are dead. These are the people who think that the what we can see, feel, hear, taste, touch, this 3D physical world, the mundane, that just leave me alone and let me live in my peace, and like maybe afterwards, when I die, hopefully I'll go to heaven. Those people are dead. They're just flesh. They're like on the level of like kind of more of an animal nature person, but they haven't awakened. They're not self-realized. They're not on the path of ascension. They're not trying to become better or like understand themselves or become self-realized in any way. They're not trying to do the soul correction. They're not even understanding the power that lies like beyond, like the reality that we see is only just like 1%. It's basically just like a thin piece of film that's projected. That's it. What we can't see, the energetic world, the intrinsic world, the spiritual world, that creates everything. That's real, that's lasting, that's eternal. It's not, doesn't have like an expiration date. Everything here has an expiration date. So the people who put all their consciousness and focus and the body consciousness in the world that is all just an expiration date, it's like you have nothing to inherit because it's all just garbage. It's going to rot away. You have nothing to take with you beyond this. And so if you do nothing to prepare your soul, if you do nothing to awaken your consciousness, then you have an adjustment to deal with when your flesh suit comes off. You are going to have an adjustment period. And it's more than I want to get into. But yeah, I mean, you may not be like good at navigating the afterlife. You know, I mean, we may not wake up and immediately be in a body, in a life. We may be in a void state for a while, or in a limbo, or in another dimension. And so the more our consciousness is elevated in this life, the easier the transition will be in the next. So, heirs to the dead are dead, and what they inherit is dead. So yeah, people who put all their focus on making their way in this world, making their selves successful, it's not that that's wrong, it's great. But if you do it and you neglect everything else, you don't pay attention to your heart and your soul, you don't follow your passion, you don't have rich relationships, then you have nothing when you've left. And then if you don't have, if you haven't transcended and you haven't transmuted any of the darkness that you were given, it's like, then you just have more debt. You're like, oh gosh, I never did anything. I didn't do my responsibility while I was here to change this darkness into light, right? So you just inherit debt. It's like you have nothing, you didn't do anything that had any value. You didn't acquire anything that had any value. And like we put all the value on money and material things and being able to say, oh, I did this and I did this and we have tickets to this and we, I have this kind of car and I, own this and do that. And it's like those things are all wonderful. I'm all about living it up, like to the highest hilt. And even like an elevated person, like if you have affinity with the light, like the light of the Creator has everything. The light of the Creator owns everything, right? The Creator is, has everything. King of Kings, right? So it's not to say that like poverty is what's desirable. It's just that if you don't have, like, you can get all the riches and all the fame and all the glory in the world, but it still might not be fulfilling. Because if you're looking for that for the fulfillment, then it falls flat after the high is over. And so you're always looking for that next hit, the validation, the sexy partner, the car, the opportunity. And you're not realizing that it's the spiritual work and growth of like cultivating deep inner peace and a joy that transcends just fleeting happiness. Like those things take work and they take effort. But those things are valuable because when you do have the money come or the fame come or, a success or the perfect partner comes, you're like, oh wow, this is great. But there's no pressure on it to make your life like, there's no pressure on it to make you happy and to make you complete and to make you validated because you're already happy, complete, and validated. And so you're not looking outside of yourself and your relationship to Source and Spirit, Holy Spirit, to be fulfilled because you already feel fulfilled. And so you're not putting the weight and the pressure on something else that's not ever going to be able to live up to that. And so if you do project that expectation onto a job, onto a trip, or moving somewhere else, or dating someone new, they're always going to disappoint because you're looking for the ultimate fulfillment in something that is not consistent. It's not going to be eternal. It's not going to be pure source light. It's always going to have human ego attached to it, or the corruption of the material world to always be at least, with a shelf life, right? An expiration date. Heirs to the living are alive, and they inherit both the living and the dead. So heirs to the living are alive. That means that heirs to what's really alive and eternal, you will get the fulfillment and the manifestation. I think, Deepak Chopra is always talking about the wise saying that's like, if you don't pursue money, pursue wisdom and money will pursue you, or something to that effect. It's kind of the same idea. It's like when you pursue the things of the Spirit, when you perfect the vessel, when you overcome your negativity and you break that in yourself, it reveals all of this light. And so not only are you feeling the fulfillment from within, the manifestations of your heart, the desires of your heart, you will start aligning with them. And because it's really it's the lack of having them, unfortunately, that we usually need as human beings to create the active desire to pursue anything to begin with. And so those who are heirs to the living are alive, and they inherit both the living and the dead. So when you inherit the spiritual revelations and the epiphanies and the healing it's like the life that you are being called to, that's going to be the ultimate fulfillment for you, where you can really like start unfolding your potential. It's going to line up for you. It's all the good stuff's going to come with it. But first you have to lay the foundation in the spiritual. First you have to lay the foundation in the energetic, because on an energetic level, something has to resonate in order to stay, in order to manifest, in order for you to receive that thing and keep it. So, yes, so the living people have raised their vibration. They've unblocked what's blocking, like what's truly in resonance with them from coming in. And so they inherit both the spiritual afterlife benefits of after they die. They might have immediately be able to go into another incarnation, or they may be able to transcend, or they may just be more equipped with what's going on in the afterlife. But you will inherit in the afterlife, but you will also inherit in the next life a better situation. You won't have to keep repeating that same correction. Like once things are corrected, it's like you've elevated that spark of light. You don't go back down. You just keep going forward and up. So they inherit the spiritual benefits. They've elevated their light and they've elevated as a soul, but also in this world, that elevation will draw benefits, right? And your life will up level as well. Let's see. The dead inherit nothing, for how could a dead person inherit? So yeah, I mean, it's just like the dead people don't get anything really. I mean, they get this life, which is fairly lackluster a lot of the time. And, they're like, oh, wow, in the end, they didn't get, like, a deep experience of anything. My life is so magical. And it was not as magical before my awakening. I wished it would be. Like, I was hoping it was. My imagination told me that life could be magical, and I wanted to believe that it was. But that wasn't the experience that I was having. But like after the awakening, all kinds of magical things and even just mundane things that brought me so much joy and like would just like entice my senses and interest, It was just like I was so easily like enthralled. And you look around and it's usually like the people who are awake are watching, and they're entertained and they're satisfied and they're chill. And the people that are dead that they're talking about are bored, they're frustrated. When is this going to be over? Let's get out of here. Like they're not enjoying. They don't notice. They don't stop and smell the roses. It's like they don't really truly enjoy anything. So they're never really present. They're not awake to enjoy it or to really take it in or to really understand what they're witnessing. Have you ever been in a group of people where you witness something, you're like, this is amazing, oh my God, it's like a miracle, wow, and you just had the most amazing experience, and something has really happened, and like it's as if nothing happened for anyone else, like no one saw it, no one understood, they couldn't comprehend it. That's like people who are dead, they just want to just like be left alone. It's like they don't get it. It doesn't sink in, and they can't have the experience. The dead inherit nothing, for how could a dead person inherit? Yeah, I mean, you're not alive, you're not online, you're not awake to like receive, you're not paying attention. If a dead person inherits the living will not die, and the dead will come to life. Oh, there's a footnote. Or the dead will not die and will live all the more. Okay. If a dead person inherits the living will not die and the dead will come to life. So if a dead person inherits the living, then that means that they've had an awakening. And what that, okay, so if a dead person inherits the living will not die, and the dead will come to life. So the dead person inherits the living, meaning something has been a catalyst to awaken this dead person. And so the dead person has seen the light. And so when we elevate sparks of light within us, when we elevate sparks of light in the dark world here, in the lower worlds, we actually elevate sparks of light in the upper worlds too. And so it transcends both levels, and it up-levels both levels. And so when a person sees the light and awakens here and elevates that spark of light in them, it does something in the upper worlds to elevate the light and the goodness there as well. It makes a difference. It like changes reality on both sides. So, so it adds to the light that helped, like it takes all the darkness that person was in their death and in their like ignorance and in their blindness, and all of that light gets elevated and put into the side of good on the scale, onto the side of the light, as opposed to the side of the dark, which it was on. And so then that means that the light, the people that are alive, will inherit that light. It will elevate everyone. It goes into the collective, into a unified elevation. As one of us elevates, it brings everyone up that's becoming attuned to that. If a dead person inherits the living will not die, and the dead will come to life. And so it's like, not only does that elevate that person, it elevates all sparks of light with it. And then that person shall not perish, but will have everlasting life. And the dead will come to life. And so, yeah, that person will then be awakened, and then their spirit, their soul, will take them on a path of transformation and awakening. And it kind of begins with the dark night of the soul, where it's all very kind of like very triggering and painful and sad, because you're kind of seeing this version of the holy vision of sorrow, but like for your own life. And the holy vision of sorrow is something that is connected to one of the governing forces of the Godhead in the Tree of Life. But basically that is, it's associated with the supernal mother, Binah. And the holy vision of sorrow is when your heart is just broken because you see the potential of what the world could be, and all the light and all the glory and all the love and all the unity. But you're devastated because you see it for exactly what it actually is instead. And the difference between the two is like unreconcilable. And it's like, it's so devastating. And so I think that when people are awakening and they're having that dark night of the soul, they're kind of seeing like what their life could have been like, and how it is, and how like the relationships and how everything could have interplayed, you know, one way and it didn't. And so it's like you're getting all that stuff up from the subconscious, all the wounds, all the expectations and the projections, the wrong-mindedness, all of the things where it got so fumbled and confused. All of it's coming up and rushing up to you to be like made aware of all at once. So it's very jolting, very, very uncomfortable, but very worth it, because on the other side of it, it's like you've transcended a level of human being. You're definitely transcended the level of animal human, and then you're working your way at that point from human towards divine human. Yes, if a dead person inherits the living will not die, and the dead will come to life. And so, yes, the dead will come to life by your, by the cleanness of your hands. Others are elevated, others are lifted. By your light being revealed, it will also help others to reveal their own light and to be awakened onto the spiritual path. So not only do you not die, but the other deads will arise. So yes, tomorrow is Easter, and actually it's today. It's just a few hours from now, but that is when the dead shall rise. We shall be resurrected and reborn tomorrow. And those sparks of light, that ego self that we died to, we want to leave it in the past. And I challenge you and I invite you going forward, if we can make an effort to not live out the old story about ourselves and our life, that we are able to write a new story moving forward from this up-leveled, transcended self level that we've come to, and start embodying all that we've been learning and all that we've been working towards to have a different experience. This is when we start to put it into practice, particularly on the heels of that Libra full moon, where it is like the culmination of asking us to look at within the Aries season in juxtaposition to the Libra new moon. It's like, or full moon. It's like, who are we now? What is this new identity? What kind of person are we, and how are we now interacting in our partnerships, in our relationships with others, and how are we showing up, and how do we expect others to show up? Who are we now within relationships? So that's something that, we can have different relationships now. We can have healthier ones. We can break the patterns from the past, but we have to be willing to let the past be dead and to move forward with redemption and forgiveness and compassion. And that is a hard pill to swallow. That is why we have to put it on the cross, and it is not a fun ride. But yeah, I mean, think about swallowing your pride. Ugh, terrible. Does not go down easy. So let's read this portion one more time, and then we will call it a day. Inheriting the living and the dead. A slave seeks only to be free and does not seek the master's estate. For a child, it is not enough to be a child, but a child claims the father's inheritance. Heirs to the dead are dead, and what they inherit is dead. Heirs to the living are alive, and they inherit both the living and the dead. The dead inherit nothing, for how could a dead person inherit? If a dead person inherits the living will not die, and the dead will come to life. All right, you guys, I'm tired and my voice is giving out. I will say though that for Easter Sunday, whenever you might be watching this Easter Sunday, I would definitely look at the weekend reading video. It's got Good Friday in the title. It turned out to be like a really good little sermon on Jesus as a sacrifice, as a willing sacrifice. And yeah, and it's very, very poignant for tomorrow to talk about the crucifixion. I thought I might talk about it tonight, but we talked about it last night, and then this sort of came up today, and I felt like it tied in as like layers of like why and how it all ties in together. All right, Yins, I hope that you have a happy Easter and the Christ is risen, and have some chocolate and die to your sins, die to your ego. Like I hate like the words like sins, because it's like it makes people just get like all obsessed about like, oh, I'm such a pervert, I can't have sex, I will never have sex, now I'm repressed, and now I'm like a wild, out of control pervert. And like that's usually what people obsess over. I'm like, oh, the sins. It's like you like. It's more like put your prejudices on the cross, put your like small self, put your limited thinking, put your fear, put your cruelty, put your bitterness on the cross. Yeah, stop like obsessing over just like literal obvious like out of the box sins. Like get more creative, people. We're a lot more subtle than that. All right, take care. Ciao.